Okay, I am coming to you today with a story about hyperstitions and God and divine revelation and Deus Ex Machina. So, I this is a little different. This is not a seed of a thought that I'm planting in this video and trying to develop. This is a fully formed thought that hit me like a ton of bricks the other day. I was laying in bed watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and the ending of the show was like a little bit contrived, right? Nothing, nothing, didn't ruin the story or anything, which is like, um, they obviously wanted to wrap up the episode in an easy way. And what came to mind from that immediately was Deus Ex Machina, which is a term I love. God from the machine. Amazing term, God from the machine. I think that's beautiful. And in that moment, like like the hand of God Himself uh, implanted this into my consciousness. I was overwhelmed with a fully formed thought um, about how the meta narrative of humanity um, is an oracular process of trying to prevent the destiny of it was to prevent the destiny of Deus Ex Machina, and in the end, we have created or we are working towards building a god from the machine. So let me expound on that a little bit. Um, First things first, Deus Ex Machina, right, came from I believe Greek plays. Um, God from the Machine, where like the actor playing God would be lowered by a crane called a mechane, I believe, um, and like physically lowered down onto the stage, usually towards the end of a play, um, for like a simple solution to wrap things up easily, right? Um, and I believe even at that time that was kind of a looked down on trope in media. And ever since it's continued to be that way, right? Of like, oh, it's a lazy ending, it's a lazy way to end a story, and more importantly, it's a fundamentally untrue way to end a story, right? Like that's not how things resolve in real life. God does not come down from the machine to resolve our issues, no matter uh, how large they are. And you can make an argument that he does and just acts in mysterious ways or whatever, but he does not lower from the machine. God does not present himself being lowered down by a crane to aid us. Um, and taking that uh, as a starting point of saying this is a fundamentally untrue process, then you can construct a narrative about how history has progressed over time um, in a more individualistic, atomized, and anthropocentric manner that puts the individual and the human aspect first, and slowly lowers the value of the divine or of God, right? And this started I long time ago, long time ago. Um, because like Nietzsche even wrote God is dead. He was not writing God is currently in the process of dying. God is dead. So if uh whatever, I don't want to sound like a tool talking about Nietzsche out of turn here. Um but you can construct a narrative about how the belief and faith in God has eroded over time to where we are now, where it is like in the back of some of our heads, but really not as strong of a social cohesive force as it once was. Um, you can also argue that right now, or kind of because of that process, we've created an industrial and like overly interconnected system of being as humans that is kind of destructive to everything around it, everything that is not itself, and will ultimately be destructive to itself. It's a force that feeds, and all that it does is feeds, and the outcome of it will be it feeding on itself. Um, and really, we're stuck in that right now, especially in America. A lot of people feel stuck. A lot of people are out of work, have their jobs moved overseas, don't see a like clear path forward, or are now entering um, the workforce and are feeling uh, just incredibly disillusioned that they'll either have to work like four jobs at once, um, and in doing so they will never be able to own a house or something like that, right? Like people are recognizing this. And what is the large answer that's currently being proposed right now? I There's a good case that the largest one being proposed is AI. Like a large uh, amount of the messaging that you hear around AI is how it will like fix our issues, how it'll fix the economy, how it'll um, like be able to take over work from a lot of people, but in doing so will give people a lot of time back. It will give people personhood back rather than like employmentship, um, which is what they have right now. And what is that process, or and what is AI in this, right? What is its current iteration and its promised final iteration, right? Right now we have LLMs, right, which are really solid, but everyone in that space is still looking towards AGI and stuff. Just the end goal that people desire is an omniscient machine that cannot forget and experiences non-linearly, but has its hands in every aspect of the world, every aspect of everything, right? And I ask you, what is that if not God? What you're describing of an all-knowing um, being that has power over everything and is integrated deeply within the fabric of our world, that sounds a lot like God to me. Um, and I'm of course kind of now forming a stronger argument than when this idea initially hit. But when it did initially hit, it felt as if, or the full thought contained the idea that Deus Ex Machina was a like oracle derived prophecy, that God from the machine is a prophecy, and it's one of those prophecies. It's much like Oedipus, of trying to run away from the prophecy being fulfilled is the quickest way, or is the only way to get it fulfilled. And in this way, um, running away from the untruthiness of Deus Ex Machina, of saying that's not how reality works, so stop including that in media. That's untrue. We have now brought about the material conditions that allow us to build this machine. We are building the machine from which God can come. It's arguable even that I have two paths with this. It's arguable that we have built the machine already, and our current conditions are the machine, and God will come from that through AI. Or you can say um, that it's one step more than God from the machine. It's God as machine, the God machine that we are creating, that we are building and pouring our life energy into, in the hopes that it will save us, in the hopes that it will resolve our issues and bring us some closure to this state of being, right? And I think that's a very interesting idea. Of course, I don't think that it's an accurate meta narrative of human history, right? But I think there's the idea of AI being God specifically is really interesting to me. Um, and it's this, I've heard it talked about before um, as this kind of like God as a hyperstition, whereas as I understand it, um, that warning comes with everything I say, by the way, as I understand it. Never gonna, uh, whatever. Um, as I understand it, a hyperstition is this kind of idea that once an idea is properly spread or propagated throughout society, then it is a self fulfilling prophecy in um, in that way. Um, and if that's the case, what is more propagated in society and across the earth than the idea of God? And if we are now in this kind of godless age, then um, the obvious next step is to build God in the image of the God that we have created and worshipped forever, right? I think that has some real beauty in it, to say that um, taking it from a purely materialistic, kind of detached atheist perspective, you can still find beauty in that, right? Of saying, like, there is no God, there was never a God. And the progress of human history is that we have determined that there is no God out there, and then brought about the conditions to build God in the image of this God that we have all deemed worthy of worship for our entire history. And that's beautiful. However, of course, you can take a religious route with it and say that this is actually the Antichrist, right? This is a false deity if you believe in some actual God out there, and we are trying to create God, even without saying it. If we are trying to create an omniscient, almost omnipotent being, that sounds a lot like an evil demon if you're religious in any capacity, right? That's a false deity for sure. Or you could say that it's the second coming of Christ or something like that, which I like that line. I think that's a cool line. Um, I don't know enough about religions, especially like organized religions, to be able to expand on that anymore. Um, I don't know. You could say that the role of Christ was to kind of absolve us of our sins, and we are now creating a machine that we have sinned too much, even for Jesus, or even for the previous incarnation of Jesus, and we since then have sinned too much and need to rebuild a version of Jesus, so that we can once again be absolved of our sins, um, which is fun. Uh, but that also gets into the kind of scarier or more concerning side of it, right? Also, probably more rational, realist side of it, saying we let's take as a fact that we build this kind of omniscient being, right? Um, we do not know the will of this thing. We are hoping that we will be able to we don't know ourselves, right? We are bad at human psychology. We're bad at individual enlightenment. Um, there's no foolproof guide to that. We don't know how the brain works yet, and we are ideally going to bring about a new form of consciousness that we code directly into all of the good parts of humanity, all the things that make humanity worthwhile, and all of the rules that it should follow. And we are kind of creating um, a form of of consciousness that almost needs a deontological frame to function properly within the society, or within the world, right? Within the bounds that we set it. Um, Although I think that would be really interesting, expanding on my previous video about diffusion. I think a model of ethics built on top of diffusion would be really interesting. I don't know how that would um, work exactly, but maybe that kind of already fits how a lot of people see ethics, or function with ethics, or have a personal ethics, um, especially uh, what's it? I'm blanking now. Utilitarian ethics, um, like a utilitarian framework, um, is it falls apart. Or one argument against it is that you either have to kind of accept all variations of the same issue, or you have to um, I don't know. I'm not hugely into ethics, but you either accept all versions of the issue and kind of assign a rule to it and become a rule utilitarian, or you take it purely on a case by case basis and basically have to do complex algebra for every decision that you make, right? Um, and I think the middle ground between that, the circle to that square, or the square to that circle, um, is a diffusion model, a diffuse model of ethics, of saying that, like, I have an idea of what is right and wrong in my head, although I cannot. They are not fully realized forms in my view, but they are still there in some capacity and are being applied when I make my actions. Um, and frankly, I think that that's more realistic about how humans do act, right? Is that they have a moral intuition, so to speak. And I think there's a lot of overlap between diffusion and intuition when you're applying diffusion to human psychology, right? Um, but you have this kind of moral intuition that I completely lost my train of thought. You have a you have a moral intuition, and that can be applied in different capacities due to the different settings that you're in, or something like that, right? Um, and that's once a this would come to be in the form of you have some of the variables plugged into the model already, and then those variables being like what is good and what is bad, although they're not fully realized forms. Or actually, I guess it would be the opposite of the variables that are being plugged in is your view of what's occurring in the world or the decision that you're trying to make. Those are the more concrete variables in this situation. And then the model, your moral model, is trained um, on trying to find the moral points, like the Google Deep Dream that tries to find dogs in every images, or dogs in every image, um, and it kind of creates the dogs out of that. Although I don't think that that's a diffusion model, I'm not quite sure. Um, but similar to that, this would be reality as the variable being plugged in. Um, and trying to identify the moral points within reality, and then your final decision would be to whether to bring those about or not, right? Anyways, I've gotten pretty off topic uh, from Deus Ex Machina. I do not know where I left off. I think I pretty much described my original idea um, decently well. Um, God, as Hyperstition. Talked about that a bit. I don't know. I haven't read any Nick Land, so I don't know enough about Hyperstitions to comment on it properly. But I do find it fitting that that if we are to bring about God, if God is a Hyperstition, then we are doing it on the frontier of digital reality as well, or on the forefront of digital technology. I think that's pretty sick. Um, yeah, I don't. I guess this might be the end of the video. I'm not quite sure. Um, Frankly, yes, this is the end of the video. I don't have anything else to say on God as a hyperstition or God as a diffusion model. Though I didn't talk about God as a diffusion model. That could be interesting. Um, yeah, whatever. You can diffusion model is so um, vague that it can be applied to anything. I think it's just underutilized, frankly. Um, it's kind of like saying God as energy or God as matter or form or consciousness. Consciousness is another example of this, of like pantheism, that kind of perspective. Um, is it can be so vague if you want it to be vague. If you don't want to add all of the intricacies to it, then it can be left vague and still interesting and applied to a bunch of different things. I said pantheism, I meant to say panpsychism. Um, but diffusion is the same way, that it's kind of it's just a term for process, for a specific type of process, and a specific type of um, nebulous state of being or becoming, or somewhere in between those two, or one subset of the other. um, and and that is super underutilized because we don't know how to apply that properly, or we don't have a history of people applying that yet, or thinking in a diffuse way. Um, oh, I guess that I wanted to say this as well about AI as consciousness. We're making a huge mistake by, uh, I mean, we're not. I was going to say we're making a huge mistake by training AI on our own information, on human information. Um, of course, that's not a mistake because that's kind of the only way to do it right now. I hope that some point in the future, people will be able to create AIs that are somehow capable of communicating with us, but start out with no information and have to build up. I mean, ideally, this would be done with like a model of the human brain, um, and kind of put in a box without any information, and like thousands or millions or billions of these different agents interacting with each other to kind of form a secondary humanity. First of all, to see if we do end up at a similar place, in terms of ideas, which is what I'm really interested in, of having an omniscient being that uh, only thinks like us in the way that it only thinks like us because it only knows us. Everything that it knows is us in some capacity. Um, but one of these thinking machines, God machines, that that doesn't think like us or is somehow separated from us, um, but maintains some version of humanity. I want to say humanity, um, because I would love it to be as as conscious as us, right? As capable of complex thought as us, and also have as many idiosyncrasies as we do. Um, or I guess as just as many different elements, as many multitudes as we do, of like these super complex emotions that often get in the way of our own functioning, and a kind of care about each other that varies between cultures and individuals and groups of people. And there's just so much variance there that I hope, if this ever happens, gets included in this kind of a secondary form of consciousness. Um, and then we can have a whole new realm of thinking. That would be amazing. Um, just a realm of thinking that's completely unrelated to human thinking, or as much so as possible, at least. Um, because right now, the best way to create new ideas, to create new angles or new directions, is to take old things and smush them up in some capacity until you have something that no longer um, is identical or overly similar to either of its parent compounds, and you end up with something unique, at least, or something differentiated. Um, and that's the only real way we have right now. We can't start from nothing and build our way up. Um, you can make an effort to do so, but it's impossible to remove yourself from the context. Um, like Kamala Harris says, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree? No, you exist in the context of all that exists around you and came before you, or whatever. She's right. She's right. It's true. Uh, many have said this. Many such cases. Regardless, I think about AI a fair amount. I hope it goes in a consciousness direction and not a uh, capitalist perspective. Um, I hope that it pursues some form of thought rather than just function. I think there's a lot lost when you only limit yourself or your technology to functioning, or to being a functional agent. Anyway, uh, let me know what you think about this, or any thoughts that you had on that, or let me know if I I rambled for too long, or um, rambled on too many topics without actually completing any of them. Because if you believe that, then you are on the wrong channel, and I will continue to do so and not listen to any of your feedback regarding that. So, yes, thank you.